I'm with Yann, who will be known to some of the electorate. You stood for election in 2018?
Yes, in the general.
Your first election?
Yes.
Reform Party candidate?
Yes.
District 1, St Helier. There were other candidates for Reform there, weren't there, in District 1?
In District 1, yes, it was me, Kelly Langdon and John McNichol.
McNichol. None of you got elected?
No.
Why not?
I can't answer that question. I guess that's ultimately up to the electorate. There could be a dozen of factors that play into that. Unfortunately, the voter turnout was low in the district, but it was low throughout the entire island. That doesn't excuse it, but I think it's representative of the entire political culture in Jersey, in that people just don't turn out because they're just so disenfranchised.
It's a mystery, isn't it? What is the magic ingredient to get people to vote? To participate, even to register to vote, is a hurdle, isn't it?
Yeah, well, most people tend to register to vote because the parish sends them the form and they just fill out everything that the parish sends them. So that usually gets voter the registration higher than what it probably is. If otherwise they didn't send out the forms. But ultimately, I think one of the things that people have to what people have to do is realise that ultimately abstention doesn't actually achieve anything, because at the moment we've got a vicious cycle where politicians lie. They say one thing at election, do something completely other in the chamber. People then find out, then they just get disenfranchised and think that, oh well, they're all lies, so I'm not going to vote. But ultimately, if people don't turn out to vote, then they're not.
But those people who do tell whoppers, they still get elected.
Yeah.
Nobody exposes them, do they?
Yeah, and even if they are exposed, you know, the exposure as well also disenfranchise people, because ultimately they see, oh well, they're just a bunch of lies, so I'm not going to turn out and vote. Why should I turn out to vote for people who are ultimately going to lie? But if you're not going to turn out to vote, then they can't be held to account and they can't be kicked out of the States.
I was a bit surprised this local little by-election for Richard Blondell's seat. There was 9 candidates, I think, or 9 or 10, 9 candidates. 2 of them were very strong representation or association with the parish, and I was surprised they didn't do better, because I thought their parish network would have got them in there, but it didn't. You had a lady from, what was the name, the country she comes from? Kazakhstan, and yet there was quite a strong feeling at the beginning, oh, you have to live in the parish, you have to be locally born, all the rest. And I thought, well, isn't that fabulous? It gets won by somebody from Kazakhstan. You know, I mean, there's no accounting, is there, on the day? There's no accounting. I can't read elections at all.
Yeah. But I think that also might be because people who probably voted for her last time came out and voted for her this time. So ultimately, it's not just about being a part of the parish system. It's also about having your face known and talking to people.
Well, she was very strong on the meetings she'd organised and making cupcakes for all that was very strong, which went down very well. Sounds like a nice, friendly person, which she probably is. But it's not very political. It's not political. See, I'm a political person. You're a political person, I can tell. And you want politics discussed. But it doesn't matter. You can go, like, I remember one year there was a constable got elected. He grew the prize gladiolis. And that was his entire election agenda. He grew gladiolis or some such flower. Yeah. And that was all you had to be.
Yeah, I mean, most of the time, most of the rhetoric around election campaigns is, you know, ice cream in the sun and apple, you know, apple pie, and you know, and it's kind of like, you know, also a lot of the election discussions and rhetoric and narrative is usually quite trivial. So for example, this employment dispute that the states have had with their employees has been going on for well over a year. It started way before the last election, but when it came to the election, most of the discussion was around, you know, dog poo on the streets and traffic lights and stuff like that, that let's say isn't serious and isn't a problem. I've stepped in dog poo before, but ultimately, you know, my main concern is someone who's more political and understands how politics affects my life. I'm more concerned is, you know, is the nurse, when I go into hospital to get surgery, is that nurse concerned with actually delivering the best care that she can or he can, or is it, you know, or are they thinking about, are they going to be able to pay their bills, are they going to be, you know, what's happening with their kids at school, etc., etc.
What sort of issues were people raising with you when you were electioneering?
Most of the time it was mainly just utter apathy. Just, you know, it was the exact same when from canvassing in 3 and 4 for Lindsay, as well as canvassing in number 1 for myself and for my fellow colleagues. It's kind of, it's just there's just such a disillusionment with the entire system. And you say you're a politician, then people start having a rant and a rave at you because you want to become a politician. Then they just...
Did it help or hinder you being part of a member of a party? Were you aware of any feedback on that?
I think people like the idea of it, and I think people my age like the idea of it more because people my age aren't necessarily enticed into that old Jersey way of thinking and system where it's all about the personality. It's all about, your knowing your cousin's in-law or whatever it is. It's more about the policies and the issues. But I think the problem with people, I don't know, let's say 40 under, is ultimately one of the problems is, they know about the issues, they care about the issues, but they don't see the issues reflective in the discourse, and they don't see it reflective in the debate. And also, when they look at politicians, they don't really ever see themselves in the politicians. They see it in, let's say, someone like Sam, who's younger, but they don't see it in, let's say, I don't know, the constables of the parishes, who are traditionally a lot more older. So it's
of course, one of the benefits of being a party, the party did put out a manifesto, very detailed manifesto. But again, did people really study it? I mean, if you say to somebody, oh, we're going to close this road off and make it a one-way street, they get much more excited about that, don't they, than they would about a party manifesto. This is the difficulty. How do you overcome this? It's not even apathy. It's sort of, they feel very strongly about the, closing off the road as a one-way street or whatever, which they are proposing to do in that district. Havre Pas, there's quite a big issue now.
Yeah.
And people will have strong views on it.
Mm-hmm. But when it comes to other issues, I don't know. It's the $1 million question that I think everyone tries to answer and tries to figure out. But yes, it's... I don't have an answer on how to get people.
There no empty seat, is there? They're all filled. Somebody manages to get elected, or they get appointed, and they're not all elected, so no elections. There was almost an empty constable's seat, but that was to get filled. Next time, will you run as a deputy or as a whatever's left? If there are still senators in 3 years' time, which presumably there will be.
I definitely want to. Ultimately, that depends on how that clashes with my university degree, because I'll be doing my dissertation around about the same time as the election. I could postpone my dissertation, but I don't know how that will affect my funding. So ultimately, I really do want to, because politics is my passion, social justice is my passion. And I want to, be in that chamber, making a change and, voting the right way.
When do you become a mature student and different rules apply? Do you know? I mean, if you haven't had a grant to go away and study, you're still able to get a grant, right? Is that the scheme?
You're entitled to it under the age of 25.
Right.
Then over the age of 25, it's a bit more difficult. You're not entitled to it. You can still apply, but you're not entitled.
Right, because I've always thought that's very unfair. I'm an old codger, I'm way past, I shan't be going to university, but there are people in their 40s or 50, their line of job is finished, or they need to retrain, and they need to have a grant to go away and study because there's so many courses which aren't available here.
Yeah, unfortunately.
But it's not automatically, it's not,
No. That being said, actually, I know that I was under the old system before they changed to free tuition. It was ultimately up to 25.
Right.
You're entitled. Then after that, it's up to the discretion of the department. I don't know whether that's changed as they changed the system to have free tuition for everyone.
The Auditor General, I forget what her name is, she's just published yet another very critical report, this time of the SEB itself. The previous ones are virtually everything she looks at. Andium she did a report on. Everything she looks at, children's services comes out. They've had some extraordinarily critical reports done. Health service, no matter what anybody looks at, the voting, the Commonwealth group that came over and looked at the voting system here gave out a very critical report. It doesn't seem to make any difference how many critical reports you put out. The system grinds on, doesn't it?
Usually it does, unfortunately, and that's ultimately because people aren't fundamentally holding their politicians to account for the way things have been run. But the politicians themselves ought to say, well, this is wrong, we've got to change this. They don't, do they? Yeah, but it may be because they don't... It depends on the individual member, but some of them may not view it's wrong. Some people, because there are lots of members in that state who think, Jersey should just be the way it was. It should stay the way as it is, regardless of how many damning reports come out. And usually, these reports usually require us to spend more money, and they don't want to turn around to their constituents and say, well, we're going to have to rejig the tax system or raise taxes or etc., in order to solve the issues that have been highlighted.
Your chairman has put, I think it's your chairman who's got a proposition about the bailiff, Speaker in the States, yet again. Another of these weeping sores. The people of Jersey tried to change it back in 1768, they're still trying. You know, I mean, but now the bailiff is actually put out what is absolutely, without any shadow of doubt, a political comment on it, a political paper. But it's not, I mean, nobody said sit down and shut up, it's nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
The states will decide, the government of Jersey will decide, you're not part of it, you're not elected by anybody. Well, how can such a simple message not get through? They just come out as it's the tradition, it's the way we've always done it.
Yeah, and that's always the argument, you know, because some people in Jersey are just so unfortunately obsessed with, you know, their old feudal traditions, regardless of the consequences of having those traditions. With regards to the bailiff, I thought his comments were completely outrageous. He's unelected, and he's saying, well, no, we should kick the can down the road for another 10 years.
That's right.
And, 10 years after his own retirement as well. And at the end of the day, you know, things now aren't, you know, whether we get rid of the bailiff now or we get rid of him in 10 years' time, that's not going to actually change anything. You know, the issues of conflicts of interest remain today, and they're going to remain in 10 years. Hopefully, what I read into his comments is that there may be a change coming, because ultimately the assembly the dynamics of the assembly slightly did change, with certain members getting elected, not necessarily our members, but slightly more progressively minded members did get elected. So hopefully there are, you know, kind of, you know, liberal Tories, progressives, socialists might be able to band together and say, actually, you know what, this feudal tradition just isn't fit for the 21st century anymore.
Well, the Tom-Toms say that there is a little bit of difficulty appointing the next, the Attorney General up to Deputy Bailiff. That the Tom-Toms say that there's a little bit of dissent, a bit like Vernon Tomes. There was a little bit of dissent, of course they got rid of Tomes. He didn't make bailiff, so he was removed. In fact, I'd signed a petition with some residents here about Tomes, about his behaviour when he was in office, and there was an inquiry. It went off to Privy Council, and there was some inquiry, but it didn't. The procedure, his rejection and his ejection, was done mysteriously behind closed doors. We never found out really what happened. We're not allowed to know, are we?
Yeah. That's usually the case.
I mean, it's a very powerful group. The Crown Officers is an extraordinarily powerful group in Jersey, which people, they touch their caps and they sort of say, oh no, that's the bailiff, that's the Crown Officer, Attorney General. They are a little bit sacred, aren't they? For some mysterious reason, I don't know why.
Yeah, and I don't understand that myself. Ultimately.
Do you, I mean, I'm an Englishman. I don't feel any English patriotism. I'm not aware of it. But there is a strong Jersey patriotism, and I can't understand that either. I don't know what it is. You say, oh, my family's been here since the Norman Conquest. Well, so what? They've always had to be somewhere, haven't they?
Yeah. Personally, myself, I like the island. I like the community. Whether I would call that patriotism, I do love the island. I do appreciate the island. I mean, it's nice, it's quaint, it's safe. You can't walk around at 2 o'clock in the morning with your headphones anywhere else in the world, really.
Really?
Whereas you can here, because it's ultimately safe, and I really do appreciate that. Whether that's, but I wouldn't have that but I wouldn't say that's the same as, you know, the kind of patriotism that people have towards the old feudal traditions in Jersey, because I ultimately am a progressive and would want to scrap a lot of the old feudal bureaucracy that we have here.
In your political life, I mean, you've got I don't know what the lady is, but you've got you've got a Portuguese lady or Portuguese name, so there is some inroad made. Do you meet many so-called immigrants when you're on your knocking on doors and they speak to you? Do they discuss politics?
They do, but there's kind of they don't. Unfortunately, there is a culture over here that a lot of them don't want to get involved, because there is a kind of because there is such a nativist culture over here. You know, it's kind of, well, it's not really my place to get involved in, you know, local affairs. So there'll be members of political parties back home, and vote back home, but they won't get involved over here. And also it's because it's also a combination of that and a combination of our system is so complicated. You know, back home in most European countries, people are automatically registered. You know, it's easy to vote. You know how many votes you have. It doesn't vary by, you know, postcode.
What I've noticed with especially the Romanians, I know quite a few Romanians, and there's a fear of politics because it has been dangerous in their country to be political. And that is true of especially the Eastern European countries and other countries. I remember when it was an issue for the Portuguese here, and there was little red stars beginning to appear. They were very frightened when that was starting to happen, because I think it was when was it Salazar who died, and they were afraid here there were going to be a lot of revolutionaries bursting out from the kitchens of the island, but it never happened. It was nothing to worry about. But I noticed that a lot of the immigrants, so-called, have had political experiences in their own countries which are not very happy ones.
Yeah.
And serious stuff. I mean, it's not just, you know, it's more than a punch on the nose.
Then it's more brutal than, let's say, just marginalisation.
So you have to bear that in mind, you see.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, most of them are coming to improve their life. They're not looking here for trouble, are they?
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, it's kind of like, well, things aren't particularly, you know, fantastic at home, so I want to come here, I want to save money, I want to set up a good life for my kids. And ultimately, if I start getting involved in politics, that may affect that, which unfortunately is a sad situation. But we need to encourage them to actually say, well, no, you have your political rights, just like any other islander, and you should be expressing them. You know, because obviously we have lots of, you know, for example, we have lots of immigrants in our, or migrants, sorry, in our public sector. You know, lots of them are nurses, lots of them are teachers, and ultimately they have a government that's which is basically trying to crush them and basically say, oh, well, you know, get what you're given and be happy with it.
Well, it depends on what they decide over in the other house in England today, probably, what actually happens. But it's certainly going to be a very unholy mess of different categories of person that's going to exist after, if they do get a Brexit or whatever decision they get. The UK immigration law, as it's planned to be, is incredibly complicated. And of course, in this island, we've got extra regulations, work permits, all sorts of housing laws, work permit laws, on top of all that. So who's going to be qualified to do anything is a mystery. And of course, if you want to stand for the States, you've got to have a British passport. Yeah. Which is I think your party's tried to eliminate that, haven't they?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just not tenable, is it? You can't have all these people here of different nationalities and they all got to become British. Well, why should they?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you know, I think of it from the perspective of my mum. She's from France. She's lived here for 40 years. Right. She's lived here, well, over 40 years. She's lived here longer than what she's lived in France.
Right.
You know, why should she have to pay £1,000 to take a quiz on the UK monarchy in order to prove her dedication to this island? Absolutely. She's done it in the fact that she's been working here and made her life here, and she has a business here.
Presumably she's had to get the piece of paper for her status as well, has she?
Yeah, she will have to.
Sure, that's right.
Which is bizarre, because
I think that's just dreadful.
Yeah.
I mean, because it's not only dreadful that you have to do it, it's a record, which the authorities, they will misuse it. It's guaranteed to be misused.
Yeah. And one of the fears that I have, you know, one of the things that I see in regards to this whole Brexit thing is, oh, well, we should be changing our deportation laws. Well, why? That shouldn't change. Brexit shouldn't change that. At the moment, Jersey's deportation laws are actually quite stringent at the moment as it is, and if they can deport you, they will deport you. So my fear is that ultimately, if it's not looked after correctly and there isn't an appropriate check and balance on that, people have to make, to sign that piece of paper as settled status, they have to make a declaration on their criminal records. Yeah. But it's not at all clear what it actually means. First of all, we're told that there has to be, for if you've been sentenced for more than a 12-month in jail, whether you've actually had to have served more than 12 months in jail, and where that 12-month in jail might have been served, these are other issues. And if you put down, no, I haven't got any criminal records, who's going to check? Yeah. Who's going to know? Exactly. And if you, let's say, have had a previous past conviction and you're a reformed citizen, you haven't been in trouble for, 10, 20 years, what's to stop anyone from deporting you?
Well, the deportation process, we were assured, the meeting I went to, would be so complicated that very few people, as a result of filling out that, revealing a criminal conviction, will be virtually nil, virtually nobody, because it's so complicated to deport anybody. I know the Home Affairs Department is taking it upon, they've taken it away from the Lieutenant Governor, the Home Affairs Department can do it, but there's still a process which has to be followed, and to actually deport anybody is going to be incredibly complicated. Not going to be easy. And there is this quite a large group in Jersey who say, oh, we want to know all their criminal convictions, as though it's going to reduce the population in some way. It's going to have no effect whatsoever on the population.
Of course it's not, and that's just, you know, traditional kind of narrow-minded racism. Oh, it's these foreign people who commit more crimes, when actually, I don't know what the statistics would be, but I would imagine just by pure probability that there's more people Jersey-born who commit crimes than people from elsewhere.
Oh, well, that's very timely. It's the bailiff. Right, so you'll come back in how many years after university?
The course will be 3 years.
3 years.
And that's taking in consideration that I don't do a master's, which I have no idea yet.
Right. And would a master's be funded from Jersey?
I don't know yet. I'm going to a talk later in May about student funding,
right,
and then I'll be following that up.
Approximately how much a year would it cost you now to go and study at uni now?
So the tuition is completely paid for.
Right. And
then depending on your financial status, you'll be entitled to so much of the grant. The maximum grant is 7,500. I should be entitled to that full grant because of personal circumstances, and then ultimately you have to pay your accommodation and your living out of that. So yes, how much I have to live on, etc., will be dependent on how much the accommodation is.
You're British, presumably. Obviously, you're British. So you, at some point in your family, you were born British because you were born here.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, just thinking about this settled status business, if you had a brother, say, who was born in France, he wouldn't have the same status as you, would he? You wouldn't be British. And this is the sort of problem that's going to arise with families, isn't it? You're going to have a Portuguese woman married to a South African man. I mean, the permutations are endless, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it's unclear whether they've actually thought that through or not. And unfortunately it's going to cause a lot of harm and a lot of distress to just ordinary people who have done nothing other than just work hard and try and back themselves. Okay.
We better stop there, otherwise we'll run out of time on the my computer. Okay. Nice speaking to you. Anything else you want to tell me?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head, but thank you for having me around.
Okay, cheers.